All right, so last week we talked about how to really focus on where to focus your time and effort on, from a growth perspective. You guys remember what that was from this piece? So we had kind of that. So what section was here? Above the, yeah, when you're overwhelmed or when you're stressed. What was down here? When you're bored and it created apathy. What was in the middle? That was where you grow, right? So that's where the best growth comes from. What were the sections of vertical? So the x-axis and the y-axis.
Your experience and your challenges.
So the challenges versus skills, right? And what were the segmentations? So you got beginner, novice, expert, and master, right? And so there's a big component of this that comes into the life of an entrepreneur and entrepreneurial-minded people, because we're constantly trying to grow. And when it comes down to it, these it kind of, if you remember, it kind of came like this with the boxes. And so really our journey is kind of like this from the standpoint of it's kind of a stair-step approach. And so when we talked about when perspective creates simplicity, one of the things we talked about a long time ago is that it's about kind of changing your perspective. And if you imagine you're in a tower and each level is kind of a floor, that each floor has a window that you can look out and kind of get a different perspective of the situation. So, kind of a ground floor, second floor, third floor, fourth floor. And the same thing kind of translates straight into here. So you've got your different floors that you kind of go through and see where the perspective comes from. And so although we're, as overachievers, we're always trying to go kind of up and to the right. In reality, this journey is as we talked about, is kind of more like this. And sometimes you're on the upper edge of your comfort zone, sometimes you're at the bottom edge, and kind of all in between. And so if you think about, this tower that you're wanting to kind of go up from one flight to the next, the element that this comes parallel is that you've got to take stairs to get from one perspective to the next. And so if you're going from the first floor to the second floor to the third floor, you've got to find the stairs. The challenge is when you're learning and in this section, there's not really any lights on. There's essentially you're kind of exploring these floors with no lights on, maybe just a little bit of light coming through these windows. And so the real journey then is really trying to figure out how to get to that next level and trying to figure out how to get up there. And so, if the goal is to find the stairs to kind of get to that next level of understanding, to get to that next level of in your skill sets and in your challenges, it can be a challenge, because when there's no lights on, what happens when you're bumping around in a room with no lights on? You stub your toe on things, you bump into things, you hit your shin on things, and it really kind of continues to go that way until you end up stumbling on a little light switch, right? You flip the light switch on, and then what happens? So what happens when you're in a room that is dark and you don't know where anything is, and then you're kind of feeling along the walls, and you find a switch, you flip it on, and then what?
Look around, see where you're at.
You can look around and see where you're at. So you've really got kind of two choices then at that point, because what you think is your goal is to find the stairs. So you have two choices, right? Is one, you're probably going to see now when you take a look around the stairs, where those are, and kind of see what's happening and see what's around you. Or you can take a second to explore around, because what this light switch really reflects is kind of a breakthrough in your understanding of your surroundings, right? So that's when it all of a sudden just starts to make sense a little bit. And so now you've got a little bit of awareness of your surroundings, you've got a little bit of awareness of what's going on, and so you've got kind of two urges. Is one to look around, to explore, and really get to know the first floor, or run for the stairs. And so where this really comes back to is the goal to find the stairs or to understand, which would be more to explore. What do you think the difference is between the two? You flip on the light switch, and one scenario is you run straight for the stairs and you run up to the second floor. The other scenario is you take a second to explore your surroundings and get a full grasp on it.
You can understand whenever the lights are off, you can understand if you ever have to like travel back and the lights are off, I mean, you know exactly where you're going to go.
Exactly.
So,
Ben?
Also, I think if you go up the stairs too fast, it'll be harder to find the next light switch. Maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not a strong foundation.
Right. Jess?
That's good.
That's what you're going to say? So really it comes to, and you guys hit it on the head, is that once you flip on that light switch, you know, you've got kind of two options of exploring or ascending. And sometimes if you go too early, just like you guys are saying, is you can get a little ahead of yourself and a little over the top. And a lot of times that comes through, you know, you've got kind of two choices of, it's kind of the arrogance that you think that you got this, or the clarity that comes from exploring. And what happens is if you go, like you said, if you go up too fast, you don't really have a good base, a good understanding of what it is. You can ascend too quickly and kind of get in over your head. So you're going to probably end up more in this area up here and not have a very solid foundation. Whereas you take the time to explore and go back and really kind of figure it out, you know, at that point you can kind of, you know, we talked about last week where if you get on autopilot where it's really easy, it's, you know, it's not as exciting, but it's also, you can get it done a lot faster. Because what'll end up happening in life and in business and all of these things is you're going to at some point kind of go up to the next level, but inevitably what's going to happen is you're going to get knocked back down. You know, because once you're exploring these areas up here above your comfort zone, you're going to face some adversity and it's going to be a challenge, and you might get at that point pummeled back down into the first floor. And so think about these two scenarios now of if you took the time to explore and understand your surroundings and have some clarity, you know exactly where the light switch is, you know exactly where the stairs are. It's kind of like in your own bedroom, you can navigate that without the lights being on because you know exactly where everything is. And the same thing happens if you've taken the time to really get a full grasp and a full understanding of that first floor, because you can essentially do it on autopilot. Or when Cale comes home from the bars and doesn't know where anything is, he can still navigate his bedroom and make it and find his bed. And this comes back to once you have a full understanding of something, it's, you know, we talked about it when kind of how perspective creates simplicity is really kind of understanding the parts for the whole. You know, from the standpoint of, you know, is when you can look to the box and you can kind of see how it's kind of broken up, and you can start to see that instead of, you know, the pieces that it is, you can kind of see the different components that it makes up. So you can see that, you know, you can kind of zoom in and zoom out perspective-wise and see that it's both 12 triangles and one box. And so it's kind of seeing how the pieces make up the whole. You know, it's kind of the same equivalent to, you know, musicians. You know, they're playing notes, but there's a time when the notes become music. And it's the same thing when you have a full understanding of your role, or you have a full understanding of your business. That's when you can see when the notes start to become music, and you can kind of get a feel for it and kind of understand it. And so when this autopilot and when the clarity of the pieces and the whole becomes important is if you get kind of knocked down a level, or you just need a perspective shift. You know, this is why it's so important for entrepreneurs, not necessarily to do everything and not necessarily to know exactly how to do everything in their business, but they need to understand everything. And they need to understand how all the pieces work together, because that way they can kind of take the elevator up and down the different floors and kind of zoom in and zoom out and kind of see, you know, how best can different changes be made for the business. And so what ends up happening then is if you make the transition to, instead of the goal being to ascend as fast as possible and make it more to explore and understand, it becomes kind of a component of being extrinsic versus intrinsic? Who can explain the difference between the two?
Intrinsic knowledge is what you have yourself. Extrinsic is what you learn from other people.
Okay, what else?
Along that same, I mean, just generally, extrinsic are things that are happening outside of you, and intrinsic are things that are happening inside of you.
Right. So in this instance, if the reason you're doing what you do is just to get to the next level, then that would be extrinsic. Like you're just trying to, you're trying to be ambitious and try to just do it for the sake of doing it. So and as an entrepreneur, this is taking on bigger clients just for the sake of taking on bigger clients, or taking on higher profile things, or taking on new service offerings just because it's going to make you look better, as opposed to intrinsic of doing it for the sake of how can we better understand, how can we serve our clients better, how can we do it better, how can we have a better full grasp of understanding. From an entrepreneurially minded person, it's doing things just in order to get that promotion or just to get on that project, as opposed to trying to do things to have a full grasp and a full understanding. And this really comes important over the long period of time, because entrepreneurially minded people and entrepreneurs, we're always pushing ourselves. We're always pushing the boundaries of what we are capable of and what is possible. And it really reminds me of, Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence about, we have inalienable rights of, the pursuit of happiness along with, life and liberty. And so back then, the pursuit of happiness really was something that wasn't a right. If you think about in the late 1700s, that wasn't something that you were entitled to. You didn't have the freedom to try to do what you wanted to do. You didn't have the freedom to either do stairs or do exploration. You were born into what you were born into, whatever it may be. But now it's different, and because of people like Jefferson and Washington and all the other people throughout the years, we are given this right. And the challenge now becomes we're pursuing happiness, and it's hard to ever really attain it and really grasp it. It's kind of one of those things of chasing the sunset or chasing the horizon. If you're always pursuing happiness, it's always just outside of your grasp. And that's a lot of times what, you'll talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, that's what drives them, is just trying to figure out what's going to make them happy, what's going to make them fulfilled. And so, since this really isn't a necessary need anymore that we have to try to fight for the pursuit of happiness, what I would challenge then is to kind of flip this around and not necessarily the pursuit of happiness, but find happiness in the pursuit. And where this comes in is kind of flipping this around. Because to me, the pursuit of happiness is kind of in that extrinsic. You're trying to buy things or do things or whatever it may be that's going to try to make you happy. Where instead, if your goal is to really explore and to really understand the things that are going to push you and challenge you, and you can find real happiness in this pursuit, that's when you take control of what's going to make you happy. That's when you're going to take control of your life, and that's really where you have the opportunity to be more fulfilled, and you have the opportunity to challenge yourself. And when you have this as your goal, when you try to push yourself and take a leap and go up a level, you're going to be more willing to, because you know that it's about learning, and you're going to get knocked back down, and you can get back up and dust yourself off, kind of in the failure to failure type of perspective, and really push yourself in a way that you weren't able to before, when you're tied to your happiness and your self-worth is tied to how fast and how high you can go. And that's really a challenge that all entrepreneurs and all entrepreneurially minded people face, is how to balance that kind of pursuit of happiness versus happiness in the pursuit. So that's really the moral of today's is really to kind of flip this script a little bit and try to focus your growth intrinsically and have that be your goal. And if you can explore these floors, then you can take control of your happiness, as opposed to it being dictated by how outside influences can change your situation. So, questions?
One of the things that I've been trying to focus on recently, based off a discussion that Brandon and I had, was sometimes I think as go-getters and entrepreneur and like-minded people like that we are, we're constantly driven and driving and going a million miles an hour. And that's kind of what I see that you're describing here, is the ability to see when you need to slow down, to speed up. And so this kind of breaks it down for you and the benefits and why. And
Yeah.
if you don't, some people don't understand that, so.
Yeah, because the speed up to slow down, or the slow down to speed up,
Yeah.
really comes if you're focused on finding stairs as opposed to focusing on exploration and understanding. You know, and then once you have a full grasp of the layout of that floor, then you can go as fast as you want because you know where everything is. So that's a good point.
Another connection, sorry, another connection with the habit loop. Like if your habit is pursue happiness, get happiness, and then you're happy, ultimately or eventually it gets to the point where you get the happiness from the pursuit. The reward it starts before you start the process. It's when you first see like, oh, here's the habit that I'm doing. I'm doing something that's exciting and entrepreneurial, and then you have the happiness beforehand. And so then you have that reward through the whole process, and then once it's done, you're like, oh, I need that happiness again, so I'll start the process over again. Instead of I'll finish the process again, it's I'm going to get this reward the whole time I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of see this also as sort of like a safety net or something where, like in my favorite Samuel L. Jackson movie, Jurassic Park, they talk about how the scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could create the dinosaurs and never decided to think about whether they should or not, whether it was good for business for people to be eaten by velociraptors and whatnot. But seriously, it's true. Like if you do all this stuff and don't decide whether it's a good idea for your business, then you can potentially put yourself out of business.
Yeah, and that's the perspective, being able to kind of shift perspectives and take a high level view, ground level view, and be able to bounce back and forth. And the faster you can do this as an entrepreneur, the more responsive your business is going to be. And that's where fully understanding all the floors and fully understanding all the components of your business allows you to just like flip a switch and go from first floor to fourth floor back to the second floor. And that's going to make your business a lot more responsive and be able to handle different changes and challenges and be able to make everything more effective and efficient. So the important thing to focus is when you're starting to get stressed or bored is to understand why. And that's take the curiosity of a 3-year-old, and that's what's always important is to ask why. Because if you can identify that maybe you're pushing the upper bounds of where you're at and your skill sets versus challenges, then you can ask for help, or you can see it for what it is. The biggest thing is to kind of take that frustration or take that boredom out of you as an emotion and be able to look at it objectively. And that's the important part about self-awareness, is being able to take that objectivity and then be able to attack it for what it is and not get caught up in the emotions of it. Because when these emotions take over, it's really hard to take that rational view and really attack it with the things that you need to do. And so that's what I'll challenge you guys, in the next couple of weeks, is really take a look at what are the things that you're doing that aren't necessarily very exciting, but can you do it with your eyes closed? Could you do it without having to even think about it, and could you do it 100% on time, on point, with 100% accuracy every time? If so, then start looking for another challenge that's going to expand your skill sets. If something's really stressing you out, try to identify why and try to push yourself. Either ask for help or get some, come down a level and get some assistance. So.
Hey, Derek, I think one other good point there is that if you draw a map of the room for other people to be able to navigate, it makes it easier for those coming up the stairs to be able to understand how to get to the next level as well. So documenting and wikiing stuff like that is kind of drawing the map of the room for the next person.
That's a good point.
For sure. That is a really good point from this, also from the element of just shared practices among entrepreneurs and being able to learn from other people's lessons. And and understand that there's a trap door over in that corner and stay clear of it. You know, there's a lot of lessons learned that can be had, you know, from other entrepreneurs or other people within the company. But if you don't take the time to understand where you're at in the cycle and understand and know where you're at in here, you don't know which roadmap to look at. So that self-awareness really comes into play.